Burlington Board of Health for September 14th, 2021 to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of minutes. I'd like to take a motion to postpone the minutes to our next meeting. We had a little glitch. They were not published.
So moved.
I have a motion by Mr. McSweeney.
Second.
It was second by Andrea Sheehan. All in favor?
Aye.
5-0. I'm Ed Weiner, Chairman of the Board of Health, and with me to my right is David McSweeney, Vice Chairman, and Board of Health members Dr. Wayne Saltzman, Mary Beth Welch, and Andrea Sheehan, as well as Director of Public Health Susan Luminello, and our Environmental Engineer Christine Mathis, and we have Recording Secretary Dawn McDowell. Dawn, did I pronounce it correctly?
You did. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dawn, for coming this evening. Citizens' time. Is there anybody either here or online who is not here for an agenda item who'd like to speak to the board? I guess not. We'll move on to Chairman's report. We are the board are so happy to again be here live this evening, and to thank you to BCAT for televising this meeting. As I say, every single meeting, thank you for all you do to keep this community so well informed. I also want to acknowledge our professional staff and Board of Health members. They've been so busy over the past weeks. Thanks to all of you for your hard work and commitment to this town. My chairman's report is going to be pretty brief this evening. The virus is still with us and will be with us for a while. People are still getting sick. People are dying. Today, 24 over the past 24 hours, 24 people have died from COVID. So please, if you have not, please consider getting vaccinated. It can save your life and keep your family and friends safe. Vaccinated or not, please consider wearing a mask indoors. And for many of your questions, take a look at our Burlington Board of Health website. It is a very excellent reference source. We're always here to answer your questions or just talk about the pandemic and the vaccine. Feel free to call our office. Call me, as many of you do. Call any board member anytime. We're here to help you. Thank you very much. I don't have anything listed here for subcommittees, but I just want to note that subcommittee, we did interview some candidates for the Associate Director of Public Health. We are scheduling full board meetings for second interviews. Also, Dr. Salzman, a quick note of our discussions with the COVID committee. Thank you for last night.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you
I
for
thought you
last
wanted me to
night,
give you a quick
being on the selectmen's
Absolutely.
meeting. Myself, Dr. Salzman, and Susan Luminello, we addressed the selectmen last evening. And you want to mention anything else about COVID committee?
Not that we won't be talking about a little bit later, I think.
Thank you very much. We also have a quick report on the Small Cell Committee. Andrea Sheehan is the representative for the Board of Health. You want to quickly tell us what the Small Cell Committee is all about? And what's going on?
Sure. So the Small Cell Committee was formed because Burlington passed its first application to AT&T back a while back, and they did it pretty aggressively. And so we have a small cell tower, which is the new technology coming on Mall Road near the Leahy facility. The reason the subcommittee met was to really take a review of lessons learned from the activities that transpired. We spent a lot of time, and potentially, we'd like to recoup some of the engineering fees for these future installations. We want to address some of the vague language that was in the policy section, not in the bylaws, which is being reviewed by attorney Donna Brewer. And we're also looking at annual testing. How do you validate that the carriers are really fulfilling their obligation, making sure that they haven't made any technical changes to the boxes or altered the original installation? So Donna Brewer is making changes to the language. We will have a meeting in the near future. I think she's submitted the changes at this point, and they just need to be reviewed. Paul Segarino was also part of the committee, and he's calling North Andover because they've done quite a few installations in the past. And we're just gonna see what, how does the recertification work in their town? What are they charging for those? And, how often do they do them? Because right now, it's done annually. So again, we shall be meeting soon, and we'll have another update at that time.
Thank you very much, very nice. I'm going to ask the board to take one of the discussion items out of the agenda and to present it now. I'd like to introduce our IBC Community Representative, Peter Daw, and I'd like our director to please introduce him and maybe say something about himself, and so the community knows who he is. And could we please have a motion to take that out of sequence?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Dr. Solomon, second by David McSweeney. All in favor?
Aye.
5-0.
Right.
Director.
Yep, so Peter's here. Peter, I think he'll come up once he turns his, he unmutes himself and says hello, and then I'll let him introduce himself. So Peter is a new community IBC representative, and this is his first time meeting the board. Peter, you there?
Yes, I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Just gonna,
Great.
there he is.
Thank you very much for doing, first I want to say thank you so much for taking this responsibility. We need someone in the community to represent the people of Burlington, and you came forward and really thank you very much for that. Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, no problem at all. As you said already, my name is Peter Daw, and I have an educational background in accounting, but most of my work experience has been in facilities. Currently, I'm a supervisor over at MIT. I oversee the sanitization process of about 1.2 million square feet, and most of that work is around labs, as you may expect at MIT. So, pretty familiar with a lot of this. I'm just happy to help out the community.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Dahl?
So is he replacing, so we have a IBC representative today, right?
Jimmy Harris.
Yeah, and I'm sure he's getting overloaded with all the,
Yeah, so Peter is, he's not replacing Jim, he's just working in conjunction with him. And
Gotcha.
now he sits on one IBC, and we had a short discussion, and he said, if the need arises, he would be willing to sit on more than one.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Maybe IBC is for the community?
Institutional
Institutional,
Biosafety Committee?
That's right, IBC. Thank you. A big responsibility.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Thanks for
Thank
joining
you.
us.
Anybody else, any questions? Do we need to vote on him?
I don't think you need to.
Can we do
but
that?
You can, if you so prefer.
I'd like to be official. I want it to be official, Peter. Could I have a motion to, what would we say? Confirm IBC Community Representative Peter Daw. Could I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
Wait a second. Motion by Dr. Salzman, second by Mary Beth Welch. All in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Thank you so much for taking this responsibility on. People of Burlington are well represented. Thank you so much.
No problem.
You're welcome to stay for the evening, or you're welcome to enjoy supper. Thank you. We're going to go back to the agenda. 243 Fox Hill Road Stormwater Regulations. Well, we're going to continue the 243 Fox Hill Road discussion. That is the Negron residence. It's involving a drainage situation, complaints, and a Board of Health order as, quote, a violation of Burlington's regulation for stormwater and runoff management, Section 4. We will hear tonight from the owners of 243 Fox Hill Road or their representatives if they like. I see also representatives from 3 Sumner Street, the Rapucci residents, 5 Sumner Street, the Rumsey residents, 241 Fox Hill Road, the Sullivan residents. This is a complicated situation. You will hear tonight from Burlington Board of Health professionals, members of the Burlington Board of Health, and very important, everyone who would like to speak at this hearing will have a chance to do so. Members of the Board of Health have traveled to the site. I think every member has, at least one time and sometimes more. And the board will hear all testimony and may act to uphold the original 243 Fox Hill Road violation order, make changes to that violation order, dismiss the original violation order, or continue the discussion. There is a new stormwater counter complaint. However, we cannot discuss that at this time. Our professional staff and board has not had a chance to review it, and there have been no orders made at this time. It was received by us in the last week. Now, the Board of Health's goal is to maintain public health and quality of life within our town, ensuring that all the laws and regulations are maintained to protect our community. We've got a long record of working with everybody and trying to come up with a just and satisfactory solution with all the issues that we faced over the many, many years. I will tell you, I have spent a lot of time, and so will the board and so has the professional staff, on this complaint, hearing, discussion. It's not easy. It's not easy for you. It's not easy for us, and it's not easy especially for me. I have people online who may want to speak. I have people here who would like to speak. We have town council online. Is that correct,
Yes.
Director? Mm-hmm. Online, and who is that town council?
Jay Kellerman?
Jay Kellerman?
Tallerman.
Mr. Tallerman is representing the town, as he had the last meeting, and there are many of you here who are also live. Now, let's be considerate and orderly. Everybody will have their say, and hopefully we will come up with some type of a decision tonight, or we'll move ahead and we will continue it. So, I will turn this over to our environmental engineer, Christine Mathis. Thank you so much.
Sure. So, as you all recall, this discussion opened at the meeting your meeting in July, following the issuance of an order letter at the end of June. The board continued the matter until this hearing tonight. Between that last meeting and last week, I visited this multiple properties approximately 15 times and monitored the amount of rain that fell over the periods of time that I went out to visit, and took photos of whether or not there was standing water in the location noted at in the prior board materials and in the site visit that you all took on August 4th. So several different rain instances occurred, some with heavy rains. Surprisingly, after one particularly heavy rain, there was no standing water where I would have imagined to see some. However, that had been preceded by a fairly dry period for the preceding 2 weeks. Then an additional couple of inches of rain fell within a few days. This was in mid-August, and that resulted in a moderate standing water pool, if you will, at the low point between 3 Sumner and 241 Fox Hill. It took about 3 days for that standing water to fully dissipate. If you will recall that recently we had heavy rains over a short period at the beginning of September. That particular rain incident over a 2-day period resulted in a very large amount of standing water from the low point of the backyard at 241 Fox Hill across the entire lower lying portion of 3 Sumner and into the backyard, side yard, or I'd say backyard of 5 Sumner. You have those documented in your board materials, and my documentation shows you when I went, how much rain had fallen in between, over what period, and what the observation was in terms of whether I found the area to be dry, some moderate, some standing water, or significant standing water. I did have an occasion to observe the outfalls of the sump pumps located at 241 Fox Hill Road and 5 Sumner. In my opinion, the outfall from the sump pump at 241 Fox Hill is appropriately infiltrating on that property. It's roughly 100 yards from the property, the back property edge, and there's plenty of ground cover and a gradual slope allowing for that sump pump water to infiltrate. And when I did go out there during heavy rains, although there was some pools of water in the area of the whole area down to the standing water was not entirely saturated. I also did observe the sump pump at 5 Sumner, and I think it's positioned also to infiltrate on that respective property. It flows into the backyard approximately 30 feet off the fence line. And I'll take any questions.
Okay.
Christine, the 241 Fox Hill, the Sullivans, where it's, you said that there are some pools. I witnessed that too. Is there something in that ground where that, the grate is? Is there a pump in the ground? Is there a pipe that directs it somewhere? Do we know what's underground there?
So I believe that, so you can see the white PVC discharge pipe that comes out the back of the Sullivan's house?
Yeah.
I believe that flows into a underground pipe, and that underground pipe, the end of it is basically where that grate is.
The grate, and then when it gets to the grate, how does it get, it just comes up above the grate and just spreads out amongst the green?
What's that?
What's under the grate?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Is there a pipe under the grate that directs it some way?
I
Is
believe
there
the pipe just
pump?
ends at the location of the grate, and
Then just comes up and
then
spreads out?
it just goes into the ground laterally, or maybe,
We just don't know, right? If
Yeah,
there's
I don't-
something in the
I don't have a
ground.
design
That's my
for that.
question. So that's my question, is we don't know. Okay.
So I guess the question is it's your role as our professional, as you do every single time we have these, what is your recommendation? I don't see recommendations here. Your role is to give us recommendations, and I haven't seen any. What are your recommendations? I've been out there. I know all the members have been out there. As our professionals, what are your recommendations?
my recommendation is that something has to be done to restore or mimic a drainage pattern similar to that which had been there before, or to allow for a avenue for the water to go that is not a permanent or intermittent standing water pool at the backyards of primarily 241 and 3 Sumner.
So I just want to make this, so your recommendation is to uphold the order
Yes.
that has been, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have any other questions before we go on? Yes.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Christine, so this has So I just want to make sure it's clear. I'm not discussing the counter complaint. But when I was out there and I observed through the walkthrough that was there, there was in the Rumsey's a 3 Sumner, or is that 5 Sumner? 2 sump pumps in the backyard, and we weren't sure where that was, or pumps. I shouldn't call them sump pumps. We saw 2 pumps with PVC piping. Do we know where that was pumping to and what that was pumping? Do we have any idea through your
So-
investigation?
So when I observed the sump pump in action most recently, it comes out the back of the house. There's a small raised structure where there's some playground equipment, and that's the discharge pipe from the sump pump. I do not know, we could ask.
Yeah, I mean, we could
Yeah.
maybe ask that, but,
I don't know what that other PVC
so
structure.
it was going towards the backyard.
Correct.
Okay. And then, I had a similar question about the Sullivan's sub pump, and you're saying that's appropriately infiltrating,
I believe so. There's quite a distance for it to,
right? And I guess so I appreciate that, and I guess my third kind of comment or question is, when I was out there, I did notice, deeper into the woods behind the Rapucci's backyard where the grass area was, kind of the woods area, there is signs of wetland vegetation back there, so it tends to be wet. At least I observed some wetland vegetation.
so when I was, on my very first visit in response to the original complaint in May, I went with the conservation administrator, and he said that there were no wetlands.
Okay, but there's obviously, there's no designated wetlands, right? But I did see wetland vegetation there, but and you can see that there's water that settles way back in there, more than just recent, like you can tell it's aged water. Is that normal flow, or are you saying that should be dry? We're saying that should be,
What area of the pipe?
behind the grass area of the Rapucci's yard, like in the woods there.
According to the conservation administrator, he noted no wetlands vegetation.
And so in your opinion, none of the other neighbors are contributing to the issue?
I can't rule out that in large, heavy storms,
Right.
that, like, for example, the last storm that we had, last significant storm that we had, I would bet that you might have a puddle on the property line between the Rapucci's and the Rumsey's, and you would have a puddle on the property line between the Rapucci's and the Sullivans, but you would not have the two meeting all the way into the middle.
Right, okay. Thank you. Other questions, Mr. Chairman?
Please.
And to Christine, David's, I had the same question. When we did the tour, the walkthrough as a board, there were, as you said, on the border of Rapucci's, and I think, is it Rumsey? Am I saying that right? Along the chain link fence, there is the 2 that looked as though pumps, cell pumps, I could be saying it, but some apparatus that's pumping along that chain link. Also what I witnessed, I've been there a couple of times too, that the sub pump from the Rumsey's is, as you said, it's underground near the playground area. And it, when I went back 2 other times, those pumps were removed outside. So I'm just curious of, are those used only certain times a year, certain months for that neighbor, for those outside pumps? Because they weren't visible for the other 2 times that I did a walkthrough.
Yeah, I only saw them the one time that we were there as a group.
Yeah. So exactly, and when I went 2 other visits, they were no longer visible. And there is in the back, when their drain from their drain pipe does have a pipe at the end in their backyard that does face the Rapucci's property from their back drain pipe as well, and not just the front, but in the backyard. So their drain pipe down does face towards the Rapucci's property.
You're talking about it like a roof drain?
Yeah, and then
Okay,
there's a long, it's on the other side of the playground area, so I saw that. I also walked the property of the Rumseys, not just where it was, a lot of water standing around the whole back of the property. I walked during all the grass area where you would use to play or just walk, and that was very saturated. So my shoes were soaking just in the grass area, not just the perimeter of the property. The abutter neighbor in the back was all standing water as well from the other street. So that's what I witnessed. So I'm just curious about the pumps that aren't there and when are those utilized for,
I just witnessed after
Yeah.
the most recent rain, I just
and
witnessed.
they're no longer there,
Yeah.
so I don't know if it's a certain time of the year that they're utilized.
Andrew, do you have any questions?
No, I don't.
Do you have any questions?
Actually, I do. So, 243, were you able to see what that looked like in the backyard after the end of the rain?
I encountered Mrs. Negron out there. I asked her if she had water in her yard, and she said no.
At the last meeting, we talked about some of grass clippings. Can I ask about that?
Yeah.
Okay, there are grass clippings in the back, and you took a look at those. Do you feel that they had any of those clippings or some of the vegetation that was dumped there? Did that have any impact on, you feel, on the flooding in that area?
I don't, just because of the timing of the amount of water, and when we've seen the water. I can't say because I wasn't out there 4 years ago, and I know I understand from others that the practice had gone on for quite some time. So grass clippings, personally, a lot of people mulch their grass when they cut it. I don't see that as an impetus to, or that it would impede infiltration of stormwater. Leaves might mat it, slow it down a little, but, they're not gonna act like an impermeable surface.
Okay. Does anybody else? I'll save our director's comments till the end. I'll ask anybody first online, would they like to speak?
Yeah, so we have Mr. Rumsey raising his hand.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Rumsey.
Thank you, Board. I'm just curious about the 243 Sumner sump pump. Where does that discharge?
In front of our yard.
Street.
Mr. Rumsey, did you hear that?
Yeah, I did, but I did think there was some concerns that there was an issue with pumping water into the front of the street.
It's underground, once a month.
So, we saw it that day, I believe, during our.
Yeah, I've seen it too.
Walk that day.
It doesn't pump to the street, it pumps.
Yeah, so all the board members saw where
It infiltrates.
Okay. Thank you, Board.
do you want to ask him some questions about his pumps?
Yes, I'm glad, and thank you for being online. The walkthrough as a board, I think there were 2 pumps outside that were like along the chain link fence. And then when I did a walkthrough separately a few weeks ago, I think right after they had rains, and I actually did one today, and I didn't see those there. Are those used certain times of the year or? And
They're not used certain times of the year. They're used, I have stuff. Thank the good Lord, I have multiple residents. I have things. And, as I had mentioned in the first meeting, it's a temporary setup constructed out of 2 Rubbermaid bins with a hose.
okay.
And I discharge the water when needed. And as I had mentioned in the first the board meeting, that, I haven't experienced this much water in so many years, and I do bring it up
Anyone else?
when needed.
And where does those pumps discharge to?
Discharge it
I put it to the other side of my yard.
to
To the backyard?
to the,
Yes,
just
it's
to your
discharged
neighbor, to your,
Right.
not towards Mr. Pucci, towards the other neighbor, is that what you're saying?
Nope.
Nope, I'm sorry. does it go to looking at your house to the right or to the left?
To the right, to the very furthest part of the right, towards up the hill, so to speak.
And are they just like, it's connected like a pipe that just goes all the way? I didn't see that. I just saw the pumps. I didn't really see.
Yeah, anybody with a pool, it's a 2-inch roll-up pool
Yeah.
hose.
Okay, didn't see the connection there when we went for the walkthrough.
It sounds like they're portable pumps. Is that correct? You've moved them around on your property and you've had these portable pumps for a while.
Correct. They've been in my shed for the past 3 years up until, the beginning of this year.
Is there anybody else online?
I'm online.
Go
I'm
ahead.
Sarah Sullivan.
Yes. Do you have any comments?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One, I believe my understanding is correct when I say that people are allowed to have sump pumps that pump water from their basement into their yards. Am I correct about that?
Yes.
Okay.
As long as your water stays on your property.
Right. So then it's probably not reasonable to believe that where the sump pump drain is at 241, which is about, I don't know, 10, 20 feet from the house, collects there and lets out into the ground and then miraculously jumps 75 feet over to the woods without anything in between. I'm just wondering. That's my first question. My second question is, did I just learn for the first time that 243 also has a sump pump?
I think they said they have a sump pump, however, they pump to the front of their house and not in the back. Am I?
And I think that was brought up at the first meeting
Yeah,
too. We
yeah,
asked
front.
who
So
had
their
sump pumps.
sump pump pumps in the front and not the back. That's what I heard tonight. I see that Mrs. Negron is I know people now. I mean, but I'm sorry, but Mrs. Negron said yes.
Okay, so just so that I'm clear, 241 Fox Hill Road is well within their rights to pump the water out of their basement into their yard, as long as it's not onto somebody else's yard.
As long as, and I'll ask my environmental engineer, as long, am I interpreting correctly? You can pump water onto your own property, but it must stay,
infiltrate into your own.
infiltrate, stay on your own property.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, do we have anybody else online? Because I want to make sure that I can see them, because once we start here.
We have a few more online, but I'm not sure if they're here for this matter. So if you are, please unmute yourself and let us know. So no one else.
Okay. Now let's speak. Who would like to speak first? And I want to give everybody a chance, one at a time, before we go back and forth. So, sir, please, spell your name for the record, because we have our recording secretary who's online, please.
Attorney Richard,
You want to
Please
come
come
up?
up.
Yeah.
Richard Vita, V-I-T-A, I'm representing Mrs. Negron.
And I'd like to address several of the questions that we just discussed with the online callers. And I do have a different position with respect to the question on the issue of the sump pumps and the water outfall. And I'm referring to the regulations of the board. And while it does state, as you indicated, Mr. Chairman, that it must be infiltrated on the property. B, Section 2 states that the sump pump outfall shall occur at an up-gradient portion of the property or a portion that will allow for it to infiltrate on the property of generation. The outfall shall not be proximal to a cross-gradient or, I'll add significantly, or a down-gradient property boundary. So when we're talking about the property at 241 Fox Hill Road, it's clear, I mean, you took quite a bit of time at the site visit. The rear of that property is always descending down towards the ultimate end where the water is pooling. So you have above surface water, and we all know that water travels subsurface. When you look at 5 Sumner Road, and you walked it, I know that a group of yous walked that property, as well as you did on 3 Sumner Road. The rear of the property goes in a grade directly to the rear section, close to where the pooling is coming from. And so when that sump water, whether it's done once in a while or when there's a storm, when that outflow, whether it's from the drains or whether it's from one or more sump pumps, that water is going to the back, and that is traveling to the area where the accumulation takes place. They are only allowed to discharge the water under your own regulation to an up portion of the property. If they do not have an up portion, your regulation says that they must go underground. And it spells out clearly where they should do it. And it should be the sump pump and the piping and the stormwater must be installed underground. Overland hose or piping connections, which we know, we seen on 5 Sumner has it. We also have a 241 they installed several years ago. There's in the record an email from one of Mrs. Sullivan's children that they put in this catch basin. But when the catch basin gets filled, the water gets discharged to the rear of the property. Now, the argument that they're saying, the argument,
You gotta keep, I gave, you'll be
the
able to
argument
speak
that they're
again.
saying is that somehow the thought of it traveling so far, it is far-fetched. The point is, you're not supposed to have the sump water travel in a downward trajectory of your property.
Susan, would you like to comment on the?
Sure. So, so the regulations state, as he said, up gradient or the property of generation. So, yes, it's not being discharged up gradient because there is a gradient there, although, it's slighter and then it gets more of a gradient. It's not just a steep slope. It is a slight gradient. But the second part of that, property of generation, where this is the Sullivan's property. So their property extends from this discharge point, this grate, you calling it a catch basin, we're not sure what's underneath it, it sounds like. But this area here, it goes down, it may go down gradually, but it's still on the Sullivan's property. The Sullivan's property extends quite a ways, and it actually, once we get into that back part of Mr. Rapucci's yard, we're looking at the Sullivan's property there. So it's the Sullivan's property where it's so wet. So the question is, I guess for the board, can we determine how much of that sump pump water is contributing to this larger area, if we didn't have a wet area down there and they were just running the sump pump, it's likely this wouldn't even have come up.
Or maybe,
We
maybe,
normally,
Mr. Vida, are you saying that the overflow of that sump pump grade contributed significantly 2.5 feet of ponding? 2.5 feet of a size, and I'm not good
Yes.
at size, as this size room, 2.5 feet.
that is a factor along with 50-something years of dumping leaves and mulch, and I'm gonna say the term mulching has not been accurately described. This is substantial dumping of leaves. You have a picture of
Okay, all
my,
right, hang on a second, please. So, Ms. Sullivan, the sump pump is draining your home's basement water when it accumulates. Is that true?
That is true.
That's what the sump pump is doing. If water accumulates in your basement, the sump pump turns on and it drains it out to keep your basement as dry as possible, right?
Right.
And how much water do you get in that basement?
Well, not 45,000 gallons. I'll tell you that.
How often does that sump pump go off?
I mean, to be honest, I haven't lived in the house for about 40 years, so I can't really say. The sump pump was put in 6 years ago, and there was never this kind of lake thing happening in those woods until December of 2020. So I'm pretty sure that what's happening out back isn't because of the sump pump that my mother put in the fall of 2015.
Yeah, and my point to asking the question, Mr. Chair, was on the amount of water. We're talking about water in a basement that is being sumped out to keep it dry.
I'm having a hard time understanding how that volume of water is contributing in any way to the problem as it's trying to keep a basement dry.
Okay.
so the other aspect of this is how can it be fairly concluded by the board that water that's being dispersed to the rear of 241 is being fully infiltrated? It isn't. It's traveling above and it's traveling below ground, and it is contributing to that condition in the past. Now, there's a picture that's noteworthy that I would like you to see. My daughter went to one of those piles of leaves, and she took the toe of her sneaker, and it went straight down into the leaves. We don't know how deep. They're just literally piles and piles of leaves back there. It cannot be good for water absorption.
Prevents evaporation naturally. I mean, that has to be a factor.
So,
we're not talking about a little
in any event,
No, Mr. Vida has the floor. Mr. Sullivan, correct? I be all the time in the world. Mr. Vida. I want to make sure he.
Mr. Chairman, can I just make a comment? Because and certainly these are valuable and good conversations, and you're bringing up some great points that I think we need to take a look at from the counter complaint perspective. I'm getting nervous that we're talking a lot about the things that are in the counter complaint.
Yes.
And not about the complaint itself, and I'm wondering if, we're trying to take these separately, that maybe we should.
so
I think the reason why we're talking about them is because they weren't brought up
I
in the initial.
understand, I'm just
Yeah,
saying
my
that
point is
we can't talk about the counter
Well-
complaint because it's not on the agenda, right? So we can't discuss it. So I'm
Right.
wondering and these are good points, but I'm wondering if we didn't have time to investigate it and/or have it on the agenda, if we're.
So I think that's a question for town council. So town council has told me we cannot discuss the complaint as a complaint against the other neighbors because it's not on the agenda. However, they're using it, we can discuss the leaves and the sump pumps as part of, they're bringing it up as their defense. So, Mr. Talman, do you want to just explain that a little bit better for everyone?
Yeah, Susan, that's right, Jay Tallerman, Town Council. That's essentially correct. There is a line at which the chair can direct conversation to that. It wouldn't be fair to the property owners against whom the counter complaint has been made to have a hearing or discussion of any kind on that complaint without proper notice so that they could prepare for it. But I do think there could arguably be some relevance to these issues as to a defense. I do think, I don't want to jump ahead or get in the way of Mr. Vita's discussion. I do think that there was some misconception of one of the regs with respect to the sump pump stuff, but I don't think it's particularly relevant to his defense, but it would be relevant to a complaint against the property owners.
So, Mr. Todman. Tollerman, and it's Dr. Weiner. Mr. Tollerman, let me just ask you, because I need to make sure I fully understand it in everybody. Let's say that in a counter complaint, whatever, this is just a counter complaint, that we give orders around a counter complaint, and the people who have been given the counter complaint decide to say, all right, we'll do with it. We'll do what we order them to do. And they don't complain, and they go ahead and do it. That means then there would be no hearing on that type of a complaint, correct?
That's correct.
So I'm saying, possibility is it would never come to us. Is that correct?
It's possible, but any discussion of it, even in terms of coming up with an order by the board as a whole, as opposed to a directive from staff, would have to be a discussion item on your agenda anyway. So to the extent the board was considering issuing an order, then it would probably come up on a specific agenda item.
It would, but they would not necessarily be challenging. If they did not challenge it, then there would be no hearing on it, correct? Other than the fact that there'd be no hearing. So
There's a difference between a board deliberating over the observations of its staff and the issues posed in the complaint in terms of making an order and the right to challenge that order or have a hearing based on that under Chapter 111. That's correct.
So it may never come.
It may never come up because it may never become an order of this board.
Thank you. So there's your answer.
I don't know if that's my answer or not, but but I guess my point is, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, but listen, I don't really have a problem with it. I do believe, if we're just looking at the original complaint as it stands today, and looking at the stormwater regulations, are there violations? Probably. But that being said, I think if you're looking at the whole issue, and I do think that, maybe, I don't know yet because we haven't done a thorough investigation. I think there's, if there are 4 straws that broke the camel's back, just because the grown straw is the one that broke the back, doesn't mean the other 3 straws aren't complicit in the issue. And I don't know if I can now make a decision based on just the one violation without taking a look at the broader countercomplaint. That's just me talking right now.
Okay, I understand. We still haven't taken testimony. I don't want to cut you on. Thank you, Mr. Vita.
You're welcome. Thank you.
The Negron, Mr. and Mrs. Negron, do you have anything?
What's that? You can, yeah.
Again,
Yeah, you did.
we can't talk, we're not going to discuss the counter complaint
No.
at this point in time.
So can
No,
I,
she-
Mr. Chair, can I just ask one question of the
Sure.
Negrons? Just one question. Just for my own edification, please. before the trees were taken down from your property, and before a fill and loom and whatever was brought onto your property, did you seek the advice of a professional to understand what the impact of that might be on your property or the surrounding properties?
We
So
hired a
you-
professional
No.
company.
I'm not talking about a landscaper who brought in the stuff. I'm talking about an engineer
Yeah, we
or
talked about it at
somebody
the
who would
first meeting.
understand that.
We talked about it at the first meeting, about the steps that we took before we did the fence.
So repeated, I believe Kimberly Negron said that she made calls to various departments. She checked the Board of Health on the website. There wasn't anything that suggested to seek.
So did somebody come out to the property, say, if you take down these trees, and if you add all of this fill like you are thinking of doing, this is going to be the impact of doing that? Was it
No.
an engineer?
No.
Landscape engineer? Everybody called to help give advice, to help there be an understanding that might have ultimately mitigated this from happening? That's all,
No.
that's all I need to know.
We came across a picture that I think would be informative to your board members.
Please, yes or no?
No, the
please.
answer was no to your question.
No, okay,
I did
thank you
not
very
say.
much.
But just so you're aware as well, this isn't, as we discussed a lot in the first meeting, this isn't something that's just new, that like, we're saying that the sump pump is generating all of this water. This is something that's been happening for a while, but the way you position the question.
Just my edification of understanding what preliminary work was done, just looking
Yes.
at this issue solely, before all these changes were made, to try to help me understand cause and effect.
So I would like, Mr. Chairman, just to have, a picture is worth many words, as you know. But this is a picture before any work was done, and it shows the area where the trees and where the property between the three summer and the Negrons look like prior to doing the work. And I think it will give you a different picture of what you thought that they were faced with when they undertook this project. So with your permission, would you pass that? Just pass it around. You can keep it.
It was from Google Earth. It was like from
yeah,
years
on
ago.
Google.
Please speak to me.
No, it was
Speak
a
to the
Google
board.
Earth.
Says it was
It's like a
from-
satellite shot, like Google Earth.
Mrs.
I was hoping
Negron,
they'd
please
pull it
speak
up
to
so
the
you guys
board.
could see it too.
Please speak to the board.
So on
No,
Google,
Google Earth.
they drive around.
Excuse me?
Please to the board, please. You know, you can ask us questions, but speak to the board. We can't let this get out of hand. Thank you, Mr. Vita. We're gonna take a look at this. Does anybody else here have anything else to say? Mr. Sullivan,
Do you want him to come up?
you can please, you can come back up if we need you. Thank you. We have to do this technically. It's not that we're throwing you out. We have to, it's technical.
Please sign in.
Yep. Don't know what this means.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I appreciate that very much. I just want to say that, you know, even though I haven't been living in 241 Fox Hill Road for quite some time, I'm pretty much the general caretaker for the property, and I can tell you every little bit that has to do with the property from the top to the bottom of the house and the property. And I can tell you in regards to the sump pump, the amount of water that's been in the basement that is pumped out has been a small fraction of anything at all.
Can you speak into a microphone? I'm
Oh,
having a
sorry
little
about
difficulty
that.
hearing you. Thank you.
I can tell you that the amount of water that is pumped out of the basement, you know, might fit a trash barrel, maybe two, during a storm. It's not a large impact at all. And when the water goes out to the, at the terminus of the pipe, there is a tremendous amount of ground cover and large trees that soak up that water very quickly. Well, there might be a puddle right after a storm. Within 24 hours, that puddle is gone, dissipated, soaked up into the ground. I don't know where it goes, but what I can tell you is that there is nobody here in this room that is an expert on well, actually you might be, on the expert of what happens to groundwater and how far it travels once it gets soaked up into the earth. So the supposition that that water could travel such a large distance without any supporting documentation such as dye tests and things of that sort is absolutely ridiculous to even comprehend. There is no evidence scientifically that has been presented that would produce a satisfactory result to those claims. So, you know, bottom line is, if you're going to look at that as an issue before this board, you know, and you're gonna look at it seriously, let's do a dye test. Let's figure out where that water goes. But short of that, there's gonna have to be some sort of documentation that the Negrons can produce to testify that that water that leaves that sump pump, or any other sump pump for that matter, goes to that place, that low spot in the land. Now, regarding the trees, the leaves and the clippings and so forth, we've been putting leaves and clippings in that location for over 40 years. And never has there ever been an issue with groundwater in that spot before the past year. I can tell you that those leaves at each fall, those piles of leaves are quite substantial, and by this time the following year, those leaves are pretty much gone. They have composted into the ground. And as the engineer for the board has mentioned, leaves are permeable. Water goes in, drops on top of the leaves, goes through the piles, and goes to where it should go, the lowest spot on the ground. And the thought that leaves or clippings or anything at all would somehow miraculously stop water from going to the lowest point really needs to have a better grasp on what water does. So I just want to throw my 2 cents in there that, you know, we need better scientific facts than what the Negron's attorney has presented before this board to substantially state in any comprehensive way at all that the water from the sump pump at 241 or those grass clippings area has anything to do at all with the lake that has formed over the past year.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All I have to say.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Anybody else? Please come up and just sign in, please.
Sure.
With regard to the sump pump pumping out, this all started essentially December 26th, 2020, when my backyard got totally flooded. I then borrowed a pump, and I pumped out 14,800 gallons in about 3 hours. And this water accumulated over more a time period than that. There's no sump pump in anyone's residential home that even comes close to pumping any kind of amount of water that would make that kind of a significant puddle or area through my entire yard. So the Sullivan sump pump has been there for 6 years. The Rumsey sump pump has been there for at that, if not more. And all of a sudden, miraculously, in December, all of this water started to accumulate shortly after the land was altered at 243. So to blame it on the sump pump or the leaves is, to me, ludicrous at this point. Enough said. I think I made mention of this the first time I was here, but just to reiterate and refresh other people's memories, I did that 3 times, by the way, that I pumped out. About 45,000 gallons of water rounded off.
And where did you pump it to?
Into the catch basin.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anybody else? Yes, please come up and sign in, please. State your name.
Connie Rapucci. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody on the board for all your consideration, all the site visits that you made, and the professional demeanor that you've all used towards this entire situation. There are 4 homes involved in this. 3 Sumner Street is the only one who does not have a sump pump. We have never had an ounce of water in our basement and have never had any kind of problem in our backyard until this past year. Mr. Vita said that we were dumping 50 years of leaves. First of all, we haven't lived there for 50 years. We've lived there for 43. The Negrons have lived there for 12, 13, 14, close enough. We've never had this kind of problem before. Where we dump our leaves, yes. As Brian Sullivan said, it composts. So we were trying to build up the area using ecological matter instead of junk or fill. We've never had an issue with groundwater until this past year. Yes, water travels above ground and below ground. The trees took care of the below ground water, the trees that were there before they were all torn down. When they quenched their thirst, they took the water from the above ground. So there was never really any kind of a groundwater situation. But that doesn't happen now because the trees aren't there. When the trees were there and there was no groundwater around, we never had a mosquito problem in the area. Since the trees are down, since the groundwater has shown up, the Negrons have had 2 instances of mosquito spraying in their yard. We've never seen this before in the neighborhood, let alone in one home. And that's about it.
Thank you very much. I think everybody has spoken.
Mr. Rumsey would like to speak again. He's got his hand raised. Go ahead, Mr. Rumsey.
Hey, Ford, I'm just curious, 5-7 years ago, and we potentially hit on this in the first meeting, the town ran an amnesty program. So, part of the conversation that has come up over the last couple of minutes was how you're pumping out your water, how your sump pump is discharging your water from your residence. So I actually signed up for the amnesty program. I had representatives from the town come out. They toured my basement. They toured my sump pump. They toured my discharge in the backyard. And they said, there is no reason for the town to spend the town money and dig a hole and travel it all out to the front of the street and put it into the sewer. So that being said, I'm curious, where does this fit in now that Mr. Vito had mentioned section 12473 and pumping to clearly I'm misrepresenting that number, pumping out to a higher level and then having the water naturally flow out into the street. So I guess the bigger question is, has the town Board of Health been in contact with the DPW that was in charge of this amnesty program to make sure that all of the residents are falling within the guidelines?
I don't know. The amnesty program only was involved. Please correct me, Doug.
Yeah, I'm not sure how long ago that was.
If you were pumping your water into your sanitary sewer, then they allowed you. Then you were then asked to pump it away.
Right, so if somebody had a sump pump in their basement and instead of putting it outside, they were putting it into the sewer system through a sink or something, which is illegal, but the amnesty program allowed you to come forward and say, they said, we're not gonna fine you.
To help the
we'll
town help,
you,
right? Yep.
Connect up to the storm drain system to prevent extra water from getting into the sewer system, because when you have extra water in the sewer system, you can have sewer overflows from combined sewers, and that's a real big problem. So that's
Yeah,
what
it
that
makes no sense to
amnesty
be right
program
now and
was for.
See.
Sorry, what did Mr. Rumsey say? I didn't hear.
And the Board of Health regulation addresses, you know, came out of the, I don't know if you all remember, I'm sure you do, the drainage permit process that we had, which wasn't really a regulation, but that's what our stormwater regulations came out of, and the intent of that is to prevent flooding on people's properties from neighbors. And one of those ways is through a sump pump. So if somebody has a sump pump discharge, they might put it right on the property line. So I don't get water on my property, it's going on to the neighbor's property. And that's the intent of that sump pump section in stormwater regulations, to prevent somebody from taking their water and putting it on somebody else's property.
Okay,
Same.
so just for the clarification, then I could potentially move my pump to the front of the property, and if it naturally leaked over into the street and went down the sewer drain, as opposed to
No.
the street
The street
drain.
isn't your property. So according to the Board of Health regulations, you can't put the water into the street. It has to infiltrate on your property. So if you took your hose and you put it to your front yard and it was all infiltrating in your front yard and it wasn't going out into the street, great. That would be a great solution,
Okay.
you know? Instead of putting it towards the back of the yard where obviously there's issue. Yeah.
I have a question, and it will be my last, if I may.
Okay, please.
So we never had this water situation out in the back the way that it exists today. And I actually sent Christine a picture from, I don't know, about 10, 15 years ago that showed the lay of the yards. And the property at 243 was always slightly higher than the property at 241, and the picture demonstrates that. Long story short, my mother finally got her sump pump in the fall of 2015, and there still wasn't water out in the woods the way there has been the past year. We do not have a way to get that water out of there when it happens, because that area of land is lower than street level, and it's illegal to pump it into the street, and there's not a drain there. And we don't have access to get it out of there through anyone else's yard. So my question is, if the board rules in favor of, 243 was not out of line when they raised the grade of their land several feet and took down all the trees, and now all of you are stuck with a problem that was created when they made the change, is the board going to explain to the Sullivans at 241 how to resolve the water issue that exists on their property?
The answer is no.
No. No. So the board is, that's why we're here. The board is making a determination of whether or not what the Negrons did is a violation of the stormwater regulations. And if it is, then they need to mitigate the water that they created. We all know there's a problem back there. They don't have to fix the entire problem. So they're not gonna, even if the board did rule to uphold the order, the expectation is not that the Negrons are going to pump all the water out of there, and therefore there's not gonna be any more standing water there, because there was standing water there before the Negrons did anything. So the question is, did the Negrons, is this a violation of the regulation? And if they would need to mitigate to get to the state that it was prior to them doing the work that they did. So there's water all over town. There's lots of streets and areas of town that have water problems. And the board is not saying we're not gonna have any water problems in town and everybody's gonna fix them. What the regulations say is that you cannot make it worse for your neighbor. So that's what the board has to consider here tonight in making their decision. Did the Negrons violate the regulations by causing water to accumulate on the neighboring properties?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I just wanted to ask the director or our environmental engineer, and I think it kind of goes back to something that Wayne had asked earlier. Are you required to pull a permit to cut trees on your property?
No.
Okay, thank you.
So, if everybody else has spoken, I'm going to ask now the Director of Public Health. I guess the options we have here are up to uphold, to not uphold, to rescind. The option is to postpone and continue. We've heard from the environmental engineer who feels that we should possibly uphold, or are there steps that we can take anywhere in the middle? For instance, have somebody do a peer review and see, and everybody's asking for a possible independent determination, which I don't see, we cannot pay for with the town. Can a order be upheld in steps, in which an estimate could be taken if we would want to do that by anybody, and determine what exactly is going on, or remedy? I think that our environmental engineer has provided us direction here. But what are our full options? And in saying that, I'd like to help us out, because not only are you Director of Public Health, you served as an environmental engineer for many years, not only for this town, but for industry. So I'm going to put you on the spot, and you asked me not to, but I told you I would. So,
You always do.
I always do. I always do. I've been on this board for a number of years, and I have always put the director on this board, because the buck stops with the board, but 49 cents with you.
So, I mean, I think you've outlined it perfectly. Those are the options. Uphold the order, rescind the order, continue. Now, if you're going to continue, then you need to state your reasons why you're going to continue. So what is going to happen between now and your continuing? Are you looking to collect more information? Do you want to see, whatever that is, what do you, we need some direction as far as the reasons why you would like to continue. Now, you're asking a little bit of the in-between. What's the in-between? So I think I would point to the Negrons on that, because they did say at the last meeting that they were going to look into it a little bit, see if they could, get somebody out there to get an opinion about, what actually could be done. So I'm just wondering, were you able to do that? Is that something you looked into? Like, do you have an idea of the solution here?
So if I could speak
Sure.
to that, so after the meeting, if you
Mr. Vita, it's very difficult. We would love you to be on television as well as hear you.
So actually, towards the end of the last meeting, if you recall, there was a point in the hearing where Mr. Rapucci told the board that he had the perfect solution, that Joe Pandolfo had given an estimate of $3,000. This is all in the record that you have. And so after the hearing, I contacted and had conversations with Mr. Pandolfo. he said he gave no such estimate, and it wasn't his conversation was with the Sullivans. However, he did say that he would come down to the property, and he would explore the idea that he did say he talked to Ms. Sullivan's about an idea of having at that area of the corner of the property of the Rapucci fence, the Negron fence at the corner where the Rapucci property hits the corner of the fence on the Sullivans. And he talked about having something that would be in the ground, and then because the storm drain that was right at the property line on Sumner between the Negrons and Rapucci's, that a pipe would be run to the storm drain, which of course involves getting the town to okay it, to allow it to be connected.
It's already present. We've seen it.
Yes, but they have to, DPW has to prove it.
Yeah, that's because it was there before the Negrons filled in their yard.
So he said that the most economically feasible way to do it was to run it along the length of the property that was right at the border. It was actually right straight line on the Rapucci's property directly to the drain, and that the cost would be $13,000 or so. And of course, he said it would involve, having to do that work. And he said that estimate would be less because it's the shortest distance in order to do it. Unfortunately, Mr. Pandolfo has had COVID. We've been after him a few times. I have emails if you'd like to see it, but I did get this verbal estimate from him, and he hasn't provided a detailed estimate to us. Within the last 48 hours, my daughter asked him again in an email. But that's the extent that I can report to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for doing that.
So, it sounds like we have at least one person who thinks that there can be some type of solution. Should, the board decide to hold up the order, which you may want to have them, if you do decide that, you may want to have them come back to the board and discuss a little bit more about their other options. Now, since we can't discuss the counter complaint because it's not on the agenda, hasn't been issued an order, I don't know if you want to discuss them both at the same time. We could do that if we put them both on the agenda. That's another issue, another reason why you may want to continue it.
So if we continued it tonight, we could consider the counter also?
And I'm gonna let Jay Talaman weigh in on that. The options for considering the counter complaint, if the board, so the counter complaint
involves the leaves and the sump pumps. So, the question being, so now the Negrons are gonna put in this drainage system if you hold up the order, right? But then, are they then just, mitigating the effects of the leaves and the sump pumps, which is, that's something that needs to be looked at with the counter complaint, which, we're not discussing tonight.
So, Mr. Todman. Is he there?
Yeah.
I am.
Did you hear our directors?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the discussion, so the discussion of the counterclaim is a separate matter unto itself. It's whether viewed in isolation, the neighbors to 243 have committed a violation of your regulations. The discussion of the facts within the counterclaim as maybe contributing factors or defenses to the board's order with respect to 243 are a different thing. Now, that's a bit of a Venn diagram so that there's some overlap. So if you wanted to kill two birds with one stone, you could continue the hearing and discuss the hearing some more, and also have on the agenda a discussion of the counterclaim. I don't think it's absolutely necessary that they be wed together, because as Susan mentioned before, you can certainly discuss the contributing factor of the sump pumps within the hearing, either tonight or at a continued date on 243. So I just want to make sure you keep those things separate from a legal perspective in terms of what's at stake with respect to the counterclaims. The fact that they might rely upon the two proceedings, rely upon a common set of facts or partially on a common set of facts is a different story. So if it's helpful to the board to have them both on the agenda, by all means, do it. I don't think it's essential, but I think it could be helpful because you may be able to kill two birds with one stone.
Thank you very much. I mean, Mr. Tobin, I guess the issue is if the counterclaim has a major effect on the order that we have before us tonight, then would it not make sense to kill two birds with one stone?
Well, again, I don't view the way the counterclaim was pled was that they were violating regulations with respect to where and how you can discharge water through a sump pump. That's a separate allegation. The fact that there are sump pumps there and are discharging water might also have some impact as to who's causing the new conditions, if there are new conditions, with respect to the water behind the neighbor's property. Those are two different things. Now, again, the common thread to them is the fact that there are sump pumps discharging water, but whether or not the sump pumps are causing, or the operation of the sump pumps is a violation is different than whether or not the sump pumps are contributing to the water in the backyards to a sufficient degree as to essentially let the negrons off the hook, or to mitigate the potential violation that the negrons may or may not have caused. So again, there's some commonality in the facts, but there are two very different potential violations at issue here.
And last question is it within our purview, and I don't know the answer to this, is it within our purview to say, instead of upholding or rescinding, is to order a peer review of the situation to one of the possible violators?
Yeah, so, I've given that some thought because I had some early discussion with Susan about this. The peer review elements of this, in terms of peer review funded by a property owner, are really reserved when a property owner is seeking something. Here we have a situation where the property owner is essentially appealing through a statutory mechanism in order. I think you can request of that property owner within the confines of the hearing that they present to you a report from their own engineer as to kind of the pre and post conditions as the engineer might be able to put together. But in an appellate format where you're acting as a reviewer in the appeal, I think it may be difficult to then require them to pay for your peer reviewer. It's something I could look into. It'd be a unique application of the statute. I think it's possible, but I think before we got there, what you'd have to ask them to do is provide something that you would be able to peer review in the first place. You can't ask them to fund your study. You might be able to ask them to fund your review of their study. Now, to date, I'm not aware of the Negrons producing an engineering report. And I think if you were potentially heading towards the realm of peer review, you would want to require that they do that or ask that they do that. They could always refuse. Ask that they do that at for presentation at a continued session of this public hearing.
I understand. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Again, thank you. So, a couple things that have occurred to me while listening to the conversation. Is there anybody on the board making a claim that somehow the leaves being dumped on the property and also the sump pump on 241, are they in any violation of any law?
We don't know yet.
Okay.
It has not been investigated.
And that's the counter complaint.
That's the counter complaint.
Okay. So, that said, what I'd also like to make note of is that at no point in time at all has any evidence been proffered that either of those things is actually occurring. We don't know to what degree the leaves being dumped there are contributing to the problem, nor do we have any idea how much water that sump pump is contributing to the problem. So why are there claims being made without substantial evidence?
Well, they submitted the
we can't talk
complaint
about that.
for us to investigate it. We have to investigate it.
Okay, so I just want to throw that on the board, that,
So the three properties will be investigated to a separate claim from another party.
Right.
From
Right.
another party. Another party said you, the Rapucci's, and the Sullivans have acted against, in violation of the stormwater regulation.
right, so I'm
And
just
we
saying,
we can discuss the leaves and the sump pump as part of their defense, or saying that, this isn't all caused by us because of the leaves and the sump pump. So that's what we're discussing. We're not discussing
Right.
whether or not it's a violation of any regulations. We're discussing it in pertaining to the water that has been created.
right, so I would think that in the matter of the claim, if it were to appear and be continued and so forth, that it should be incumbent upon the complainers to bring forth actual evidence instead of just hearsay of the events that are
Well,
occurring.
they are claiming that, that's
Well,
what they
claims
claim.
claims are one thing, but
With all
evidence is
they're
another.
claiming that the
Well,
three.
we know the sump pumps are there.
Right.
So we have to
So-
investigate whether or not they're contributing to another issue maybe, right? Maybe they're just, in general, them being there, they could be against the regulations. That's what we have to investigate.
That's fine, I'm just
This is
saying,
our issue, not yours, Mr. Vita. We want to get this squared away, so you know. This is not, we're talking about a separate issue, a counterclaim which has not yet been investigated, which may or may not receive an order, which may or may not be appropriate, correct? Is that the word? So to that end, yeah, someone has, just as someone complained against the Negrons and opened up a huge investigation, one of the three, or a party opened up this investigation. Somebody said, no. It's not them, it's you, okay? Now, we can't say it is or it isn't. We have to do a full investigation.
To the
And-
best of our ability.
The best of our ability. And just my fear is that we uphold the regulation, and we could tonight, and then find out you're in the wrong. And you caused, you pumped water in with fire hoses and what, you caused the problem, okay? So that's my fear right now, is that, as Mr. Taubman said, we can handle them separately, but I don't know if we're killing two birds with one stone, but feeding two birds with one stone. I'd rather be nonviolent.
Okay, thank you for your time. I just wanted to clarify.
Just so you
those
understand where
things.
we are.
Yep, thank you.
And I don't want to continue this forever, but we need to come to some closure here. Is this procedurally, a procedural? Yes.
I have a question with regard to peer review. Define peer review.
That would be, and apparently we cannot order that, but if the Negrons want to do that, is to bring in an engineer and to do a report and say what his opinion is, what the impact of their construction, or can their, what would it be called,
Land disturbance.
land distribution cause the problem or not, an independent source.
And a peer review would be the board ordering another engineering firm or whatever.
An engineering firm
that
to
they
come out and say
selected
that
look
this
at
is
that.
what's actually going in here. So, and anybody could do that, but usually in the case of hearings like this, Mr. Taubman has so eloquently put that it's usually, we can't order that. We can't order that. If they want to do that to prove that somebody else is at fault, that that's not theirs, that's one issue. But we can't order that according to town council. If this was a development and they were asking for something, we could order it. But they're not asking for something, they're defending something. Do I have that, Mr. Vice Chairman?
Yes, you do.
Yes.
I just have a question on clarification. If the Negrons are found not liable for
Yep.
this whole situation, does the counter complaint become moot? Or
No?
is that, it does not?
No.
Okay. So if they're found not liable, nothing really happens. We just have to learn to live with it. And then we work with the counter complaint.
Which means you would, I
Come back
think,
here again and visit you.
if the counter complaint goes forward. The counter complaint is at the discretion of the Board of Health, which could be dismissed.
So now, if in fact they are found in violation, what happens? Will they be asked to alleviate the problem?
Alleviate the situation to what it would have been if they have not done what they did.
And if they choose not to do that,
Then they would be in violation.
and what happens if they are in violation?
They would be fined and brought to court. Am I, Mr. Okay.
I just was unsure.
Yeah, it's in the regulations too, so you might, it's hard to take out snippets of the regulation and recite them back, so you might want to take a look at and to address your former comments, we're here, we understand you have an issue, and we sympathize as a board with that issue. And we're trying to get to a solution that is fair and just and follows the regulations, right? So we understand where you're coming from. I sympathize personally with you, and I know the board does, in general.
I appreciate everything that
I know you do. We're trying to get to a fair solution, right?
I think.
And a just solution.
I think that the issue of the clippings and sump pumps has confounded the issue right now for some people. For some people. I'm not going to say whom, but for some people. The question is if that's investigated over the next 2 weeks and there is no, it's not upheld and there is no violation, we feel, or our professionals feel, then I think this would be a very quick decision at the next meeting. But I would leave that up to the board.
Chair, I apologize, I'm having a crisis.
I'm sorry, sure. If it's not procedural, I'm really not going to entertain it. You've given your opinion.
It
on
kind of is, it's not,
But
it's,
if it's not procedural now, you have spoken a number of times.
I understand.
Please,
I appreciate it.
really quickly, unless it's, and I'll call you out of order, but if it's
It has a matter with permission on the land at 241. We give permission for the board and any of their representatives to go on the land.
Yes,
to
you have,
review
thank
it.
you.
But in the complaint that was brought forth to the board, there were some pictures taken that had to have been taken very close and in the yard. So we don't give any permission for anybody else but the board and its
That's
representatives.
procedural, thank you very
On
much.
the land.
So, I don't know who took the pictures, do you?
I think he's referring to the,
The counterclaim pictures?
yes.
Which I took, municipal, the Board of Health site visit, so I took it when I was with you guys.
I understand, thank you. I understand that, that's a good question, thank you. So I'm open now.
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, I would feel more comfortable, I mean, we can, and I'm ready to take a vote on the original violation. However, would feel more comfortable if we can continue the discussion, give the staff time to evaluate the counterclaim, understand if there is, contributing factors and/or, they're complicit somehow in the overarching issue. My only problem, and I'm probably gonna open up Pandora's box, is we start this investigation on the counterclaim, and then all of a sudden, they say, well, it's not me, it's 10 Sumner, it's 15 Sumner, and before you know it, we have all of Sumner Ave in here pointing the fingers at each other, right? It just so happens that the Rapucci's at the bottom of the street, and the Negrones. So, that would be my only concern. However, I do think as I'm looking at, again, for myself being more comfortable with the situation and making the right call, I would like to continue, give the board, the staff, an opportunity to take a look at the counter proposal, weigh in and/or investigate, and then we can kind of take them both. So I am going to make a motion, but just to get the ball rolling, we can discuss it after, if there is a second to the motion. I'll make a motion to continue.
Do I have a second?
Give a second.
I have a second. Second to issue. I could do this, but I don't want it to go another meeting, one more meeting. I think we have talked to this to death. I think everybody has given testimony. I just feel that I want to make sure that we feel very comfortable that we did the right thing for everybody. I really do. And I know there was a lot of water there. 11.1 inches of water over the last 30 days. I don't know if there's any issue. It may come back, just to be aware that our staff brings us, says that there is no merit to the counter complaint, and then we could move on. But I do understand that. Dr. Saltzman.
Mr. Chair, you've been very fair. I'm ready to decide this tonight. You have been very fair. You've led a very fair process.
Can you agree to one more continuation?
I am not going to vote in agreement of that.
Okay. Is there anybody else? Then all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Opposed.
One opposed. 3-1-0. We will look at that one more, and then we will make a final determination at the next meeting. I thank Mr. Taubman. Killing two birds with one stone, I think that put that into perspective and influenced me. Thank you so much. Thank you for you representing us and being so professional. I appreciate it very much. I'm sorry you were here another hour and a half, but you have been invaluable. Thank you.
No problem. So what is the date of the continuation?
The 28th.
2 weeks from tonight.
Weeks from tonight would be
28th.
the 28th. Would you, it will be short. Would you please put that on your calendar, Mr. Todman?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I think we still have, Mr. Rumsey is no longer on. Oh, yes, he is. So we still have Mr. Rumsey and the Sullivans here. So we're gonna have to collect, in order to do a proper investigation, more information about the sump pumps. So we'll be getting in touch with you, or Christine, if you have diagrams or how your sump pump works. Christine and I can come out and take a look at it, if that's okay, Mr. Rumsey. Okay. Okay.
I asked this last time, make it easy. Would it be permissible? I know, I said, I've been to Mr. Rapucci's yard many times. I like your pump. And Mr. Sullivan, you're on the other side. And whom else? Mr. Rumsey, is he?
Mr. Rumsey is
Mr. Rumsey, are you on? Yes. Would you please give us permission to go on your property to evaluate?
Sure, you just want to make sure the dogs are.
So for the record, Dawn, we have approval, we have permission from Mr. Rumsey, Mr. Rapucci, and Mr. Sullivan, that's all of them.
To go on their property. We will make every effort to get in touch with you before we do that. But I will knock on the doors and I'll probably, and if no one answers, I'm just gonna come take a quick look. I have new boots now. So, okay, and if necessary, how do the Negrons feel? Can we knock and come in? And if you're not there, is there a dog? Oh, can I come take a? It probably won't happen because it's not in your property. But just so I have permission from all 4 residences. And with that, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for putting up with me. It has not been easy, but we're trying to do the right thing, all right? And I'm going to ask also if you feel so, if you can get any other information from anybody, before you come back here. But we're not going to go on for 2 hours again at the next meeting. I think we've all heard enough, okay? With that, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Rapucci. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
On the agenda, mask mandates.
Yes, mask mandates. Who is going to bring this up? Are you going to bring this up? Or I guess we pretty much talked about mask mandates last night at the selectmen's meeting. We've talked about it for how the board feels. We know how Dr. Saltzman and I feel as we spoke last night about mask mandates. We know that the people of Burlington are very smart. They know what they need to do. They know what they need to do to be safe, for their children to be safe, for their grandparents and parents to be safe, to get vaccinated. And at this point in time, since we have no way to enforce, I think I'll let Dr. Saltzman speak. We have no way to enforce. We are going to rely on education that at this point in time, where we are, we have chosen to go the education route rather than try to enforce a very difficult mandate. I think that our director has also feels the same way. But I'll ask anyone else. Andrew, do you have any other comment?
No, I agree that enforcing it would not be the right thing for us to do, and I think that education is the proper path.
One other comment, we did have somebody we spoke to from another town, and they felt that mandating was a disaster. Did not work. It was, just did not work, and it was causing a lot of problems in the town. And we will have gone the educational route. Mr. McSweeney?
Yeah, and I said at the last meeting as well, I fully support making a recommendation to wear masks, but mandating at this point in time just does not make sense. It's not something we can enforce. I worry about people being vigilantes out there causing more issues, and we really just don't have any authority to do anything once we see a violation. So I think at this point in time, plus I guess the good side, if you want to call it the good side. And Susan and I were talking earlier today and just before the meeting, Burlington's vaccination rate is right at the state, or actually a little bit above in some categories, above the state vaccination level, which is great to hear and to see. So, I think that's what we should be promoting in full force, and as well as education around, situational mask wearing. Certainly, we're taking care of the students with, the school committee mandated their mask wearing, which was a state requirement too. So I think for now, I think we're good.
Okay.
And one of the things that we noted at the last meeting too was we formed the subcommittee to kind of keep an eye on the numbers, and that's been steady. I mean, we haven't seen any, since our last discussion, any, significant increases in cases. It's been steady.
Would you know, have we had any recent deaths in this town?
I don't know that. I don't know.
So can I continue just on one thing I was just saying?
I don't think so, because we most of the people that we talk to, that we, get in touch with, are not, incredibly sick, especially if they're vaccinated. And we haven't seen hospitalizations the way we saw them before, when we were in the full, early part of the pandemic.
The one category where we're a little lower than the state average is the at the senior age level, where we're just under the state. I don't know what the reason why it is, particularly why anybody's not getting vaccinated, but particularly at that within that age group, why they're not getting vaccinated. But please, they certainly are high risk. I would recommend highly that they get vaccinated for sure.
Dr. Salas?
Mr. Chair, I will, earlier today, the director forwarded us an email from a member of our community. And I think while I was very happy that we had a question and an opinion and from this community member, I was concerned at the content of the message. So, and as I had discussed with the selectmen yesterday, not knowing what the selectmen wanted from us, but just kind of giving an overall idea about vaccination and a successful campaign. In this member's letter to us, it said that clearly masks don't work, and that's why they shouldn't be mandated, because we still have COVID. And I just want to remind our town that a successful vaccination campaign is based on three things. Number one, having an effective vaccine. An effective vaccine means that once you get it, whatever the effectiveness is, 50, 70, 80%, reduces your risk by that much of getting sick. So we have COVID vaccines, which in the real world are now 70 to 80+% effective. That means when you get them, you reduce your risk of getting COVID by 70 to 80%. That's number one. Number two is getting that vaccine into as many people as possible, which Mr. McSweeney has just reviewed for us. So that's important. But number three is filling in the gaps that are left from 1 and 2, essentially. And those gaps are wearing masks, washing your hands, keeping to yourself if you're not feeling well, et cetera. So last year, as we know, we had a very, very low flu rate. And I believe, and the science would confirm, that that was because we had an effective vaccine. It was around 50%. We got it into more people last year than in previous years. And people were wearing masks and washing their hands and socially distancing as part of COVID. So I would respectfully push back and say that masks are not effective or warranted is poorly informed information, and it is misinformation for the remainder of our community. Masks help. I'm wearing one right now. So please, everyone, if we have the advisory in place, but please understand the three things that lead to a successful vaccination campaign that will allow us to fight this illness, and mask wearing is one of them. So please consider that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We go on now to,
Mr. Chairman, there are a couple of people online, and I don't know if they wanted to
Sure.
speak to this.
In
So
light of- yeah.
if they do, please speak up now.
is there anybody online who would like to speak to the board prior to us going into the environmental engineer and director of public health reports? I just want to give you an opportunity to speak to the board if you have anything to add to the discussion.
It doesn't look like it.
Thank you so much, and feel free to call in anytime. This hybrid situation, this hybrid program that we have here of both people in person and online is working very well, and I just want to make sure that you have ample time to speak to the board if you'd like. Thank you. Environmental engineers report. Household hazardous waste day,
Yes.
8:30 a.m. Saturday.
Yep, Saturday, September 18th, 8:30 to noon at the Francis Wyman Elementary School, 41 Terrace Hall Ave. I also want to just inform, we did public service announcement, but I also wanted to inform as to broader audience here on that we're televising to that the Department of the Department of Public Health has raised the West Nile virus risk level for Burlington to high. That was as of Friday, and it was done due to a number of factors, primarily human West Nile virus cases in the area and detection of West Nile virus carrying mosquitoes at towns neighboring Burlington. So the whole area, Burlington and surrounding towns, are now at high risk for West Nile virus. And people can refer to our website for instructions on how to prevent both West Nile virus and Triple E. Remove standing water. Make sure your screens are good. Use a repellent with DEET in it. Avoid activities outdoors during dusk and dawn hours. And just note also that any risk from mosquito illnesses will be present until we get the first hard frost. So, I'll entertain any questions.
Just one clarification, no latex paint Saturday,
Correct.
and no road flares, because we get some of those.
Correct.
No road flares, but pretty much everything else. And no construction material and electronics. I think those are the big four
Yep.
that we really don't take. But fluorescent lamps,
Yep. We accept those.
Chemicals.
Yes.
oil-based paint, insecticides, those are for the most part, the things that we usually get. Oh, and motor oil, how could I forget?
Yep.
Thank you so much. Anybody else? If not, I entertain a motion to approve the environmental engineer's report.
So moved.
I have a motion by Dr. Salzman, second by
Second.
Andrea. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0. Thank you very much. Director of Public Health. Now, the Director of Public Health, as we do, will be the health agent and associate health inspector, their reports. And we'll take those first, and then would be the supervisory nurse, and then finally the Department of Public Health. Director of Public Health. So health agent or associate health inspector, do you have anything specific you need to point out?
I don't think so. I just wanted the board to know that Marlene will be coming to a meeting in October because she's working right now on an FDA program for food inspection standards. So we applied for that, and there's an opportunity to get grant money from that. And also, more importantly, to streamline our inspections and improve them in any way we can. I mean, I feel really confident we do, good inspections, but there's always room for improvement. So this is one way to try to improve inspections and then also maybe obtain some grant monies for that. So Marlene's going to be coming. She's still working on it now, trying to get all the information together, but she will be coming to a meeting in October to present that to the board.
Thank you so much.
That's great.
Any questions for?
No, it's exciting though. It's great.
Yeah.
Okay, next, the supervisory nurse. Anybody you have anything to present?
She's continuing to work on the COVID cases. Now that school is reopening, we've had some cases at the schools, so we're handling those the same way that we did last year. Where close contact is within 6 feet. We're working very closely with the lead school nurse on that. We send letters out to parents if their child is a close contact. She also clears kids to go back to school and is sending a quarantine and isolation list to the schools with dates when certain children can come back. So if there are any parents who have questions about, was my child in close contact, or my child was in close contact, now what do I do? They can always call Chris up, and she's, working on all of that.
Any other questions? Do you have any other, Andrea? I have one. I have just one statement from her report. Last night I did point out to the select board that not only are we following COVID-19, but we also are following other communicable diseases, as we have done forever. For instance, things from TB to Hep C and everything in the middle. We also we do surveillance on. So just because we're in a pandemic, for those two, for that disease, there are many, many others that the Board of Health continues to look at and get involved in the surveillance of those also. And lastly, now the Director of Public Health. Do you have anything that you'd like to present?
Just a reminder that our flu clinic is October 16th from 9:30 to 12:30 is going to be when it's open. Our staff is working really hard now on getting the color platform up and running. We kind of just got access to that a week or so ago, and now we're in the process of putting the clinics onto that so that the residents can go to our website. They'll be able to click on the link, and they can schedule, they'll put in all their information, schedule a time on that day, put in their insurance information, and then we'll have everything ahead of time. So we'll hopefully, what's going to happen is we're going to have all the appointments booked prior to even getting to the clinic. So it'll be a little different than what we normally do. Hopefully, it's going to cut down on the amount of people there and make the flow much easier. We've sent a message out to our volunteers. We have many volunteers who came forward. We actually have 16 dispensers this year, so I'm very happy about that. Because it's in the color platform, we're not going to be doing like the in-office type of things that we did before. We're going to have this clinic on the 16th, give out our vaccine on that day. If we have any vaccine left over after that, then we'll can give that out in the office. But we want to have all of our inventory available for the 16th because we're gonna focus all our appointments for that day
Where will it be held?
at the Memorial School.
Again,
Yeah,
worked out very well. Very good.
indoors. Yeah.
Okay, does any-
I've also included the memo that we discussed last time on the, it was the joint memo with DPH and DESI on testing in the schools. And it kind of outlines if the school wants to opt in to this test and stay program, how they would do it. If they want to opt into pool testing, how they would do that. I think the schools are in the same place that they were when they came and gave us the update where they had put in the application to be a part of this test and stay program, but they haven't heard anything back yet about starting it or when it would start. So they're still working on that. It hasn't started yet, and I don't know like when DESI is going to make it available, but if anybody has any questions on that, I can answer them.
Any questions for our,
Just, well, actually, one comment, or I guess it's a question, but I noticed in your notes, I had a resident call me, I called you about the telephone pole.
Yes.
Mediation, I think there was another note, I don't know if you got a different call or somebody else called you, but it would be great just to give an update of I don't know if anybody saw the workers going around, they're digging trenches around telephone poles, they're going down about 2 feet deep and they're putting.
painting?
No, they're not painted, well, I don't know if it's paint, but they're putting, some chemicals, I don't wanna call it chemicals, they're putting stuff in it and they're wrapping it, and I got a call from a resident.
Yeah, they're like little brown
Yeah,
things that kind of hold in the, and I forget the Christine, you know the Osmos or something like that, yeah. That's what the company is that does these treatments, and they're subbed out by the electrical companies to prevent the telephone poles from rotting. So it's just a new way, a treatment of the telephone poles so they don't rot. And if you go to their website, they can give you specifications on what they're using to kind of treat the telephone poles to prevent rot.
Interesting.
And the telephone poles, I don't know if they still make them out of that, I don't know if they did, but years ago it was, they were soaked in creosote, and that was prevented, to prevent the
Right, I don't
rot.
think they
I don't
do
know if they
anymore,
still do
yeah.
that or not, but I remember years ago.
but
Yeah, that they.
but the chemicals they're
Yeah.
using, this Osmos company is very, green.
Right,
and,
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think I sent you the link to
yeah,
their.
you did, it
yeah.
was kind of interesting, so thank you for that.
Any other questions? If not, I'll ask for a motion to approve the Director of Public Health reports, plural.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. McSweeney, second by Dr. Salzman. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Before I ask for a motion to adjourn, September is the month for the Jewish high holidays. I want to wish all of our Jewish members and everybody in our town a happy and healthy New Year. And with that, could I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Motion by Andrea Sheehan,
Second.
second by David McSweeney. All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, everyone. It's been a long evening.
Good night.
Good night.
Safe.